So coming up this weekend is going to be one of the biggest events of the year. It is UFC 294, Makhachev versus Volkanovski 2. After Charles Oliveira unfortunately pulled out on short notice, we have Volkanovski stepping in, and also Khamzat Chimaev versus Paulo Costa was pulled around the same time, and Kamaru Usman has stepped in. So these two fights that got replacements are as good and maybe a little bit more exciting than the original fights, just because of the short notice aspect and just the complete insanity of it all. But I will be talking about that later on in my prediction video. Before we do get into my predictions for every single fight on the card, you can get a 125% sign up bonus to BetUS if you sign up using my link and my code in the description of this video below. You get a 125% sign up bonus, but you can also get a 3-day free trial for We Want Picks premium membership service if you sign up using my code ARTEM, and you get access to my article, as well as all of Jacob's and Angelo's picks and bets, and also breakdowns from other YouTubers, such as the AI Picker and Running Mouth MMA, which is a fantastic podcast as well. You get access to all of that just below there. And now, let's get into my predictions for this card, starting off with the first prelim of the night. I believe this is probably going to be the card order because Tapology has the numbers. Usually when Tapology has the numbers, that means it's the official sort of list. So that's a little tip for Tapology users out there. Bruno Silva taking on Sharaputdin Magomedov. Great fight and very smart matchmaking from the UFC, because I can kind of see what they're trying to do here. Now, you may know that Bruno Silva fought Alex Pereira. Well, Sharaputdin Magomedov is also a very hyped up kickboxing MMA prospect making his UFC debut, and he's going to have quite a bit of name value behind him before he even makes that UFC debut. And Bruno Silva has already fought Alex Pereira. What I believe the UFC is trying to do is make the fans make comparisons between Sharaputdin Magomedov and Alex Pereira by giving him this opponent. But also in general, it is a great opponent for Sharaputdin to make his debut against, because it's another striker. And Bruno Silva, man, he comes to have some good fights. He's got 23 wins. 20 of those wins are by KO, and he's never been KO'd himself. And 7 of his losses are by submission. Unfortunately, Bruno Silva can get caught in submissions. But the thing about Bruno Silva, this guy just fights anyone, man. Like, this is the same guy that fought Pereira and Brendan Allen. I mean, 2 pretty good up-and-coming prospects, right? I mean, Alex Pereira, potentially a future 2-division UFC champion. But as for Magomedov, Magomedov is a striker. He's got a good kickboxing background. He actually has a win over Blood Diamond on the kickboxing circuit. Now, the way to get tape on Sharaputdin Magomedov is to try and find his name in the Russian translation, and then Google the Russian translation, and you'll get much more content about Sharaputdin Magomedov than you will if you're just searching up his name in English. Now, as that being said, he is a kickboxer. His kickboxing style has transitioned very well into MMA. I mean, he's 11-0 in MMA. He throws a lot of kicks to the body. One thing I will say about him that might be a bit of his weakness is he can be pressured backwards. And although his takedown defense is absolutely fantastic, and he has defended takedowns against some pretty good opponents that he has come up against, he can get kind of like held against the cage quite a bit. It's because once an opponent gets a good strong clinch on him, he can kind of struggle to peel them off and get the fight back into distance. But when the fight's back into distance, I've never seen an MMA fight where Sharaputdin Magomedov wasn't the better striker. And to be honest with you, I think he will be the better striker in this matchup as well. Yes, Bruno Silva is dangerous, but I don't think he's going to be as technical as Magomedov. And I think that Magomedov can really wear down Bruno Silva. And if he has a really good performance, this could be a massive stock increasing performance for Sharaputdin Magomedov. I'm going to pick Magomedov. I'm actually going to pick him to win by KO as well. Now, I do understand Bruno Silva has not been KO'd before in his career. I also understand that he has not even been KO'd by Alex Pereira. But I just think that styles make fights, and I think Magomedov is going to be a little bit more aggressive, and I think he's going to be engaging with Silva more. And I also think that Silva is going to be trying to engage with Magomedov a bit more and not really wrestling Magomedov like he did against Alex Pereira. Now, I could be wrong on that. Maybe this fight does go the distance, but I do believe that this is going to be a pretty good coming out party for Magomedov. So give me Magomedov to win this matchup by KO. And now we've got Jinh Frey taking on Victoria Dudakova. And I do believe Victoria Dudakova is going to win this one. I see what the UFC is doing again. Victoria Dudakova, she's quite marketable. I mean, she's 24 years old. She's from Russia. She's quite good looking. She still hasn't replied to my DM yet that I sent her in May about the dinosaur, but that's okay. I'm sure she'll get back to it eventually. But anyway, to talk about the fight. Victoria Dudakova is actually quite good. Now, I do understand that there are people out there that aren't quite sold on her, but I think that Victoria Dudakova, all like jokes aside, is actually a pretty solid fighter, and in my opinion, a really good prospect for the future of women's strawweight. And yes, Jinh Frey's overall record is 11-9, and yes, she is on a 3-fight losing streak, but Jinh Frey is a girl that can, I mean, I guess a woman that can really test these young and up-and-coming prospects. You know, she had a close fight against Elise Reed. Some people thought that she beat Elise Reed. Against Poliana Viana, she got KO'd pretty easily, but a lot of people think that she beat Demopoulos. I thought she beat Demopoulos. Demopoulos has won a lot of very close decisions recently. But as for Dudakova, her wrestling is really good. Her grappling is really good. Her top control is really good. Now, her weakness is she can fall on bottom position at times. But I think that Dudakova should be able to out-wrestle Jinh Frey. And that does mean something, because Jinh Frey does have fantastic wrestling herself. But I think if Dudakova can get the fight down to the ground and stay on top, I think she should be able to win this one. Dudakova's striking's a little bit of a question mark, but I think it's something that will develop with time. But at minus 375, maybe it's a little bit wide because Dudakova's still a little bit unproven. But that win over Maria Silva has aged pretty well. And the win over Estela Nunes, unfortunately, it was due to elbow. But I think Dudakova is definitely someone to keep your eye out for in the future. I think she's a great fighter. I'm picking Dudakova. I'm going to go Dudakova by decision. Jinh Frey is pretty tough, except when she's fighting Viana. But Viana caught her with like the perfect combo. I don't really see Dudakova doing that, so I think Dudakova wins a decision in what should be a pretty good performance from her. Now we have Nathaniel Wood taking on Muhammad Naimov. Now, Muhammad Naimov really went out there against Jamie Mullarkey and had a good performance and knocked him out, but I think that this loss for Jamie Mullarkey might age quite badly. I do truly believe that Jamie Mullarkey fumbled the bag with this loss, man, because that was, in my opinion, a very favourable matchup for Jamie Mullarkey to win, and he just fought with very bad IQ. If you go through and watch Naimov's fights, he hasn't really fought the best guys, but one thing about his striking is it is elite. He is fantastic. I believe he's a former kickboxing world champion or a karate world champion or something along those lines. Now, if you do watch his fight against Olivier Murad, I thought he beat Olivier Murad 3-2. I think he got kind of caught on the wrong end of a decision in that one there. But in that fight, Murad was trying to take him down, was trying to wrestle him, and he was having a little bit of success with that. Now, Nathaniel Wood, we kind of know what he does. Now he's 30 years old. It's time to cut the prospect out of your name, mate. You've had 24 pro fights. So let's cut it with something else. He beat Andre Fili recently. He beat Charles Jourdain recently. And he beat Charles Rosa recently. And a lot of those fights, he was striking with his opponents, and he was a lot smaller than his opponents. I still believe that I would like to see Wood at 135, but if he doesn't think he can make the weight, then why try and force yourself to make the weight? In this matchup, I really wouldn't mind seeing Wood trying to mix up his wrestling and his striking, kind of put it all together. I do understand recently he's just been showing off a very good kind of striking game, very good boxing game, good head movement, good speed. But Naimov has proven to be a kind of guy that you don't want to mess around with on the feet. And as I said, a world kickboxing background is very elite as well. And you can tell that in his striking. But I think this is a good matchup for Wood. I was pretty confident Mullarkey was going to beat Naimov because Naimov was coming up a weight class. And Naimov's kind of weakness is the wrestling. I understand Mullarkey isn't a wrestler, but I really thought Mullarkey would have the fight IQ to wrestle. And he just left himself wide open for that KO. Very bad performance from Mullarkey. I think Wood should be able to put on a good performance. If Wood can win a striking matchup against Naimov, I think his stock should go way up, but I would personally prefer to see Wood mix up the wrestling with the striking. I'm going Wood by decision in this fight here. Now we have Anshul Jubli taking on Mike Breeden. I've already actually made a solo video about Anshul Jubli because I think Anshul Jubli is a guy that really could sort of pave the way for Indian MMA. If you look at Anshul Jubli, I believe I think he's got like 400,000 followers on Instagram. I could be wrong. It could be more. It could be less. But before Road to UFC, Anshul Jubli was a relative unknown, and he come in onto the road to UFC tournament. He had a bye week, but then he took on Kyung-Pyo Kim. He won that fight, and his followers absolutely skyrocketed to like 100K or something like that. And then he won his UFC debut or the road to UFC finals against Jikasaragi, and he just blew up, man. I mean, Anshul Jubli is an absolute superstar in India. He's India's only UFC fighter, potentially. But I believe that the Anshul Jubli, the only UFC fighter from India right now. And I think that he's really going to put India on the map with this win here. Now, the thing is, you could say, well, it's Mike Breeden, you know, but at the end of the day, like Anshul Jubli, the UFC's going to try and build Jubli. I think the UFC saw Anshul Jubli skyrocket hundreds of thousands of followers in literal, like, days and weeks from just fighting. They're going to put a little bit of stock behind him. They've given him a pretty good matchup here. Now, the thing about Mike Breeden is, though, Mike Breeden is absolutely no slouch whatsoever. He is going to be very dangerous in round one, but aside from that, he does kind of slow down a lot. When he took on McKinney, I don't even know, man. It almost looked like he didn't want to win against McKinney. McKinney come in there and just kind of took him out. He lost to Levy. He lost to Hernandez again. First round KO loss. The thing about Jubli is he fought a striking match with Kyung-Pyo Kim. I don't really know why he did that, but he did. And to be honest, I thought he actually looked pretty good. But the thing about Jubli is he's not a striker at all. He's actually a wrestler and a grappler. All of his prior fights, he's wrestled and grappled. I think he's going to try and do that to Mike Breeden. It'll be interesting to see how his wrestling kind of works against Breeden's. But I think Jubli might kind of come out there in the first round, look pretty good, but then in the second and third round kind of start to take over as Breeden will slow down and potentially get out-wrestled and out-grappled. So give me Jubli to win this one. I don't really know how to feel about the finish. I think maybe a submission could be more likely than a KO. But one thing I will say is his ground and pound versus Jikasaragi was brutal. And maybe he could do that to Mike Breeden as well. Now I've got Sedriques Dumas taking on Abu Azaitar. I'm relatively confident in Sedriques Dumas. Maybe too confident in Sedriques Dumas. Now I have been sent like information that maybe Dumas, maybe he didn't, allegedly lost this fight. Josh Fremd, maybe on purpose, if he bet on Fremd, but that's what I've been told. And it would maybe make sense, because he looked really bad against Fremd, and that is a fight that he could have easily won, in my opinion. I thought it was a very good matchup for Dumas, and it was a matchup the UFC handed to him to give him a good matchup. But now he went out there against Brundage. That fight was pretty bad, but now he's coming back to his original UFC debut opponent, which was going to be Abu Azaitar, but Abu Azaitar pulled out. And I think that Dumas is going to knock him out. I think that Abu Azaitar is going to be pretty slow on the feet, and I think that Dumas is going to come out there. He's going to be faster. He might not be more technical, and to be fair, both these guys aren't that technical on the feet, but I think Dumas can knock him out. I mean, we're talking about a 5'9" middleweight that hasn't fought for a year and 6 months. 2 years and 6 months. 2 years and 6 months against Marc-Andre Barriault. I mean, Dumas should knock him out. I think Dumas knocks him out. I think he knocks him out with a knee down the middle, and probably in like the first or second rounds. Now, yes, I do know that's weird to say, because Dumas isn't really a guy that is known for KOs. I mean, I know he's got 4 of them, but he hasn't really got a KO in a while. The last time he got a KO was at the very start of last year against a 1-0 opponent. But I can see Dumas going out there. I think he KOs Abu Azaitar. And now with that being said, we can now move on to Javid Basharat taking on Victor Henry. And I think Basharat wins this one here. Victor Henry's been pretty hit or miss, honestly, dude. He come out here on short notice against Hayone Barcelos, puts the absolute pace on Barcelos, comes out of nowhere with a massive underdog win, a fantastic performance, and he beats Barcelos. Absolutely insane win. And then they give him Rafael Assunção. Now, that was a fight that I thought that he was going to win, and then Assunção beats him. And now I'm like, man, I don't know how to feel about Victor Henry. He just beat Hayone Barcelos, and then he lost to Rafael Assunção, and then he goes out there and wins a pretty close fight against Tony Gravely, and Tony Gravely is no joke. In fact, I believe Javid Basharat has experience fighting Tony Gravely, and he does. But when it comes down to this matchup, though, Victor Henry does have absolutely insane cardio, but one thing I will say about Javid is he is really good, man. The thing about Javid coming into the UFC, I was not sold on him whatsoever, because if you actually look at his pro record, he had not fought like anyone that good coming into the Contender Series. And this 16-0 guy, he had a super padded record. This 11-1 guy, he had a super padded record himself. Like, dude, like, I know he's got good wins now, but look at it before. You know, like, he wasn't really fighting the best guys, and now he's in the UFC. That skill set has really started to show, and he's looking like a fantastic prospect to get behind. I think Javid Basharat goes out there and beats Victor Henry. Hopefully he can get his first UFC finish, because he hasn't got a finish now that he's in the UFC. But I'm going to be picking him to win by decision again. You know, Victor Henry's a tough guy. I think Javid Basharat can make Victor Henry uncomfortable on the feet and out-wrestle Victor Henry as well. So, yeah, give me Basharat to win by decision in this one here. And now we've got a very interesting fight between Muhammad Yahya and Trevor Peek. I'm so sorry, I probably said his name wrong, but when I see Muhammad Yahya's fight, the commentators pronounce his name in so many different ways. Someone says Yahya, someone says Yahya, and someone says Yahya, and I just don't know. I'm so sorry, guys, but and when it comes to this fight, though, you will see that Trevor Peek is the favorite. Trevor Peek was not the favorite when this fight was announced, and he only recently flipped to a favorite, because I think now people have started to go and watch tape on this fight. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, I think it's actually a pretty good matchup for Trevor Peek. The thing about this fight, though, is I think that UFC has actually made this fight thinking that it's going to be a good win for Yahya. So, I don't know, man, how to feel about this, because the UFC, it's interesting. They always kind of seem to get what they want. But the UFC have done something pretty smart, in my opinion. They've signed a guy from the UAE, and if you do look through every single fighter from the UAE, Muhammad Yahya really is the only UFC-ready UAE fighter, and I think that they're really trying to kind of build into that UAE market. I mean, they signed guys from Bahrain. I know Bahrain is a little bit different, but PFL signed all the good fighters from Saudi Arabia. UFC's got the best fighter from the UAE. They're trying to get the best fighters from Bahrain as well. It's gonna be very interesting to see how MMA in general and sports in general kind of looks like in the future with all that's going on over there. But when it comes to this fight, though, as I said, I think this is a good matchup for Trevor Peek. I'm watching Muhammad Yahya's fight, and he's a striker, and he's not really impressing me that much. And the reason why he wins most of his fights is honestly because of his insane cardio. You know, he took on this guy that was 5-3 in Salul Tahiri, and he got out-wrestled and out-grappled in a lot of moments in that fight and kind of pressured backwards on the feet as well. Tahiri had his back a couple of times, was getting takedowns, was putting him some very uncomfortable positions on the mat. Now, yes, Peek isn't a grappler, he's not a wrestler, but what I'm trying to say is Yahya's grappling and wrestling isn't that fantastic himself. He took on this guy, he took him to the 5th round, you know, and he's winning. He won that fight against Tahiri because of his great cardio. Tahiri really slowed down and gassed out a bit. He won this fight against Makhachev as well, kind of due to his fantastic cardio. But his striking defense and his striking technique isn't good enough for me to pick him. I am going to pick Trevor Peek. Now, we all know what Trevor Peek does. He is fun. He is a lot of fun. He comes forward and he is absolutely throwing hammers, man. He is throwing hooks. He's throwing overhands. He's just going crazy for a round. And after one round, he's going to slow down a little bit. But the thing is, Trevor Peek doesn't want those fights to go the distance, you know? He's only had 3 fights that went the distance, and I believe that they were relatively recently. He had the Contender Series 2nd round win and also a win very early on in 2021. But he took on Chiefy Mariscal. That fight went the distance. He got out-wrestled. He got out-grappled. He kind of gassed out a little bit as well. Now, if Yahya survives the first round, he will have the cardio and I believe the pace to kind of maintain, especially in a 3-round fight, because his more recent fights have been 5 rounds, to put it on Trevor Peek and win the last 2 rounds, even if he does or doesn't win the first round. But I'm going to go with Peek to win by first round KO. It's so risky for me to pick Peek, especially as a favorite. He was the underdog for a very long time, and I was going to pick Peek even if he was the big underdog that he was at one point. But now that I'm seeing all the sharps and all the sharks, you know, that are putting big money in on these fights when the lines kind of drop, going in on Trevor Peek, it's making me think, yeah, I actually agree. I do agree with the movement. You know, I'm watching the tape myself, obviously, And I'm seeing things that I think that True the Peak can exploit. I think he's going to go out there like an absolute madman. I think he's going to catch Yahya. I think his takedown defense should be good enough to keep the fight on the feet here. And Yahya is going to be very uncomfortable on the feet with Peak. So give me Peak. If he doesn't win by KO in the first round, Yahya's going to win. That's just as simple as it is, to be honest. But I think that Peak can go out there and do it, man. I think he can get that first round finish. Now we have Tim Elliott taking on Muhammad Mokaev. I am picking Muhammad Mokaev, but I do want you guys to know this is a very low confidence pick. And the reason why is for Muhammad Mokaev, I don't know if he's injured or not, because he actually could be injured. He had a leg surgery after his fight against Jafil Filho. I believe that went very well, which is good for him. But the situation is for Mokaev, before he fought Jafil Filho, he was complaining on Twitter about how he had an injured shoulder that he needed to get a surgery on. And I don't believe he's got that surgery now. Yes, he did fight Jafil Filho with this injured shoulder. And yes, he did win the fight aside from some pretty nasty situations that Filho put him in with the knee bar. But as for Mokaev, like, he could be coming into this fight against Tim Elliott potentially with an injured shoulder and with an injured leg. And Tim Elliott's a good fighter, man. Like, I know a lot of people will look at Tim Elliott's record and they'll see that it's not too flash, but at the end of the day, that's 32 professional fights, and a lot of those have been at the highest level. This is a guy that has been in the UFC for a long time. Like, he was in the UFC in 2013. He went away. He won with The Ultimate Fighter, which is a very good season and one of my favorite seasons of The Ultimate Fighter. Had a pretty good first round against Demetrius Johnson. Ultimately loses the decision there in a title fight against DJ. And since then, he's kind of been up and down, but he still is a dangerous guy. He still is a good fighter. He still is a good wrestler. He still beat Tagir Ulanbekov. Used a couple veteran moves in that one there to get that one. Dominated Victor Altamirano in his comeback fight after that big situation with his family, which I won't get into. But what I'm trying to say is, although I'm picking Mokaev, I'm kind of almost like talking myself out of it, but I am picking Mokaev, I am. But I think that there is a world where Elliot wins this fight. But the thing about Mokaev is I am a big Mokaev believer. I believe he went 23-0 as an amateur. Insane. Come into the UFC, KO'd Cody Durden, submitted Cody Durden after almost knocking him out with a knee early on. Beats Charles Johnson honestly, a fight which Charles Johnson made very competitive. Beat Malcolm Gordon in a fight which Malcolm Gordon made very competitive, and beat Jafil Filho in a fight which Jafil Filho made relatively competitive. So, you know, like, there's question marks, but I do believe that Mokaev can go out there, use his insane cardio, get the takedowns, and just work Tim Elliott for 3 rounds, and I think ultimately he does win a decision in this fight. But I do want you guys to know, Mokaev, you know, he could be injured, and that's what I'm worried about. So hopefully I'm not overestimating or overreading anything, because that really could be the case. But Mokaev said he had an injured shoulder before the Filho fight. Now we've got the main card. Opening up the main card is an interesting one. Now, I would say you probably could have Mokaev versus Elliot on the main card, but I think they're really trying to use that featured prelim spot to build his name. So you could even just get away with putting Yahya and Peak on the main card. Not even joking, honestly. Like, I know Peak's not that big of a name, but that's going to be a good fight to open up the card. But this will be 2. Saeed Nurmagomedov taking on Muin Gafurov. I'm not 100% sure if Saeed is still ranked, but it's interesting that they're giving Gafurov the opportunity. The UFC must really like Gafurov, because he come in on short notice. He lost to John Castaneda, a fight which he got a point deducted in, I believe. But he kind of ultimately slowed down on that fight a little bit, and you probably could put it down to him taking on that fight on short notice. I thought he was still going to be able to win on short notice. I was pretty sold on how good he was due to his insane LFA run after he got robbed by Chad Anfeliger. That decision, just no good. And Saeed Nurmagomedov, I thought he beat Jonathan Martinez. I thought he did. Now, I think I'm in the minority there, but I do think he beat Martinez. He submitted Saeed Rokib Kakramonov after getting out-wrestled, and then Saeed Rokib got cut because of outside reasons that for some reason people don't really know about, but we can move on. In this fight, though, I think Saeed wins. I think Saeed, this is going to be an interesting fight, and I think actually a very surprising amount of this fight might take place on the feet, because the wrestling of these two guys could cancel each other out, and Saeed Nurmagomedov isn't really that much of a wrestler. Like, he does wrestle and he can wrestle, but he's a really good striker. And that's the thing about Muin Gafurov as well. Muin Gafurov strikes himself. You know, he's a very fluid striker. I think Said Nurmagomedov is also a very fluid striker, but I really like Said's kickboxing. I like his striking from range, and I think he's going to be better from range than Gafurov. So I think he can maintain the distance, keep the fight at range, and then just kind of beat up Gafurov from range to win a decision. So give me Nurmagomedov to win this fight by decision. And it just occurred to me, I think I'm picking all the favorites, but there's like some minus 300 favorites throughout the whole card, so I guess it's kind of hard to pick an underdog, but I don't pick fights based on odds, as you guys know. Now we've got Ikram Aliskerov taking on Wally Alves. I mean, if Ikram Aliskerov's minus 400, I thought he'd be wider. Honestly, this is Wally Alves stepping up a weight class. On short notice, it was meant to be Aliskerov taking on Nasruddin Imavov, and I was going to pick Aliskerov in that fight. I'm very sold on Aliskerov. I picked Aliskerov to beat Phil Hawes. A lot of people picked Phil Hawes to beat Aliskerov. They're just not sold on him, man. Like that win over Mario Souza. The way that he beat Mario Souza is good. I believe Souza has lost since, which isn't a good look, but that's a good win. That is a very good win, in my opinion. And before that, he beat Nashon Burrell, who was honestly on his way to maybe making a run back into the UFC 10 years later, because he was in the UFC in like 2013. And he was on a very impressive streak before he ran into Aliskerov. He's beaten good guys. He beat Talulin, who ended up in the UFC. Maybe he's been cut since then. But Aliskerov, he gave a pretty tough fight to Chimaev in like the 90 seconds that it lasted. When it comes to this fight for Alves is just so hit and miss, man. Like, I'm going to be honest with you. Alves has a chance of winning this fight. He actually does. Because he's so hit and miss. Sometimes Alves shows up and he's an absolute beast. And sometimes he shows up and he's just not a beast. Yeah, and that's just kind of how simple it is. But at the end of the day, Aliskerov, he does have that Sambo style. He will go out there against Alves. He will go for takedowns. He's a good striker as well. He's not really a KO guy like he did against Hawes. Like he even said in his post-fight interview, I've never KO'd someone like that before. But we all know that Phil Hawes, his chin is probably one of the worst chins on the planet, unfortunately for him. But yeah, Alves, man, I think Aliskerov takes him down, beats him up and finishes him in the first. Like, I know that's probably a long breakdown to end with that, but that is how I see that fight going. And now we move on to the big fights. We've got Magomedov Ankalaev taking on Johnny Walker, and what probably is a title eliminator for both fights. Now, I do understand some people probably think that Ankalaev should get a title shot of his fight against Jan Blachowicz, but in my opinion, Jan Blachowicz won that fight 3-2. I thought Jan won the first round and the second and the third round, and then Ankalaev kind of come back in the end. And even if you do give the fifth round a 10-8 to Ankalaev, at the end of the day, Jan still did win 3 of those rounds, so it's kind of hard to justify a title shot for Ankalaev in that situation. But as for Ankalaev, I do think he wins this fight, but I do think it's still dangerous. Now, Johnny Walker isn't necessarily the crazy fighter that we all kind of remember when he was coming up. He has slowed down in a pretty good way since then. Like, he has been getting good wins over Ion Cutelaba, Paul Craig. That was a good win, but also a pretty easy stylistic matchup for him. I mean, I picked him to KO Paul Craig. I think like everyone did, to be honest. And then Anthony Smith. I mean, it's Anthony Smith. You know, like just it's Anthony Smith. But as for Ankalaev, though, on the feet, I think Ankalaev striking still is something that is going to take a little bit of time to work on. I mean, he's only 31 years old at 205 pounds. And the way that Ankalaev does win his fights is using his wrestling. But Johnny Walker on the feet, as long as this fight's on the feet, Walker's going to be dangerous. Walker does have that insane reach. He does have that insane height. So he's got very long legs, he's got very long arms. He does like to fight from distance, but he isn't too scared to throw flying knees, to throw head kicks, to throw body kicks, to throw wild stuff that you don't really see all the time at 205 pounds. And Ankalaev's going to have to be careful of that, because he is not as good at striking as Johnny Walker. And even as well with Ankalaev, with his wrestling style, Walker's grappling still pretty good. He does have solid BJJ. He can grapple. I haven't really seen him grapple too much off his back, but he can grapple off his back and he can kind of hold his own. Maybe not to the extent where Ankalaev's going to be in trouble all the time. It's not like when you take down someone like, I mean, interesting kind of analogy to make, but it's not like when you take down Charles Oliveira and you're like, oh, like this is where Charles Oliveira wants to be. It's not where Johnny Walker wants to be. Johnny Walker wants this fight on the feet, but if it does play out on the ground, Walker still could be dangerous and could be throwing stuff up. At the end of the day, Ankalaev minus 345. I understand that he is like the #1 contender and definitely could be deserving of a title shot if the judges did kind of give it his way, but I thought Jan won 3 rounds, man. I do. But when it comes to this, I think it's a good stylistic matchup for Ankalaev, although Walker's dangerous, man. If people are picking Walker, I wouldn't be too surprised. I mean, let's look at the Tapology votes. 22% on Walker. I'm going to keep my eye out for this fight for other YouTubers, because I could see a lot of other people kind of like me, like on the YouTube, kind of putting picks out on Walker. Like, I mean, even if it is just a little bit of a fun pick, I mean, sometimes that happens. I mean, personally, I don't do picks for fun. I do my picks to pick who I think's going to win. But, hey, I could see people picking Walker for various reasons. But I'm going to go with Ankalaev. I think Ankalaev wins. I think he wins a decision as well. You know, Walker is a guy that can get finished. He is a guy that's been KO'd before. But if Ankalaev KOs Walker, personally, I will be a little bit surprised. I'm going to go with Walker. Sorry, I'm going to go with Ankalaev to win the decision here. It could be pretty boring, but I think it's going to be fun. And now we can move on to what is going to be fun. Kamaru Usman versus Khamzat Chimaev. And the reason why this fight, for me, is so fascinating, this is a fight that we potentially could have got at 170 pounds. And instead of the situation that we're in now, Kamaru Usman is the champion at 170. And Khamzat Chimaev just defeated someone to get his #1 contender spot to fight for the title. And these two are fighting for the title when Usman's trying to defend his belt. Now we're in a situation where Khamzat Chimaev missed weight at 170 so badly, he's now moved up to 185 pounds, and he was meant to take on a pretty good fighter in Paulo Costa, you know, a win where if he beat Paulo Costa, he would be in title conversations. Instead, Costa's out with that infection in his elbow. Actually seems like a genuine reason to pull out now, to be honest. For Usman, though, moving up a weight class on short notice. Hey, this is going to be good, man. I mean, I think that we're going to see Chimaev be the much bigger guy in there. I mean, when Chimaev did fight at 170, he was massive compared to everybody else. But at 185, it's Usman, so he's also a former welterweight. You know, it's not like we're seeing Chimaev fight Costa, because Costa would have probably looked pretty big in there with Chimaev as well. Usman's going to be skillful, you know. And the thing about Usman as well, which makes things also so fascinating, he's only ever been taken down officially in the UFC stats once, and that was by Leon Edwards. So let's see if we can have that record broken. Now, I know a lot of people think that Colby Covington took him down, but at the end of the day, the way that the UFC themselves has kind of done it is Usman's only ever been taken down once. Can Khamzat Chimaev go in there against Kamaru Usman, pick him up, and slam him? If he can, then Chimaev's wrestling is absolutely ridiculous. And I'd be surprised. I don't know if that's what's going to happen, to be honest with you. And if this fight is going to be a purely striking fight, which I don't think it will be, I do think that Chimaev is going to be able to take down Kamaru Usman, by the way. But if this fight is a purely striking fight, then honestly, like, maybe Usman might have an advantage. Like, I know Chimaev has insane power, but we haven't seen too much of his striking, you know? Like, when he KO'd the legendary GM3, that was in like 15 seconds. When he submitted Li Jingliang, he picked him up and slammed him and just finished him off easily. When he fought Gilbert Burns, we did see quite a bit of striking, but he didn't seem the most technical in the world, and Burns was tagging him a little bit, was testing that shin a little bit as well. So we'll see, man. I mean, he just kind of dominated Holland with the grappling there. We'll see what he has against Usman. But the thing about Usman, man, all he really does have on the feet is his jab. It's kind of all he does, just throw jabs. But I don't know, man. This fight is interesting. This fight is so interesting. I'm picking Chimaev, though. I do believe Chimaev can take down Usman. And the thing about Usman is the one time we saw him in the UFC when he got taken down and put on his back, he looked like he didn't have a lot, because Leon Edwards almost choked him out in the first round from that situation, you know? So, I don't know. Imagine what happens when Chimaev gets on top. I'm going to go with Khamzat Chimaev. But, man, like, respect to Usman. I didn't say that. Respect to Usman for taking the fight. But, man, like, I just don't know how I feel about it. 185, you know? Like, I think it's a good fight, though, man. I'm going to go Chimaev, though. I'm going to go Chimaev to be the first man to finish Kamaru Usman in the UFC as well. But this is a fight I'm looking forward to, man. Usman might be able to pull it off, too. You never know. Like, Chimaev may blow his load in round 1, completely gas out. Usman takes over round 2, round 3, because this is a 3-round fight. You know, it's not a 5-round fight like Usman's kind of used to. So, hey, we'll keep an eye out for it. It's going to be good. It's going to be fun. Looking forward to it. Now, Islam Makhachev taking on Alexander Volkanovski in a rematch. Unfortunately, it's not ideal circumstances for Volkanovski. Now, if this fight was on a full camp, I think it would be a little bit closer than what it is going to be. I am picking Islam Makhachev to win the fight, and the reason why I am picking him is not actually based off the first fight at all. It really does kind of come down to that short notice, because the situation with the short notice fight is for Alexander Volkanovski when he took on Islam Makhachev that first time at UFC 284 a few months ago. In that fight, Alexander Volkanovski was preparing to move up a weight class. You know, he took a few months off. They did the interim featherweight title because Volkanovski was fighting for the lightweight title. He took time to bulk up. He took time to get bigger. The Volkanovski that we're seeing now is going to be a little bit smaller than the same Volkanovski that took on Islam Makhachev that time at UFC 284, because he was preparing to fight against Elliot in January at 145 pounds. So that's going to be a little bit of a situation there as well. And also short notice as well. You know, Volkanovski coming in upper weight class on short notice. I don't know. We don't know how he's going to look. But yeah, it's interesting though, because the matchup is way different to the first one. To the original one. Because it was going to be Islam Makhachev taking on Charles Oliveira in the rematch. Volkanovski and Charles Oliveira are completely different fighters. Charles Oliveira is pretty tall for 155. He's massive for 155. He's very dangerous on the feet. He kind of fights from range with a Muay Thai style. Very dangerous Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Volkanovski's got BJJ. He's got striking. He's got Muay Thai. But it's not really the way that he fights necessarily. Like, the way that Volkanovski does fight is he is incredibly well-rounded. He does absolutely everything. And I don't know how people disagree with the statement. Volkanovski is the most well-rounded fighter in the UFC, and he has been for a long time. His wrestling's great. His striking's great. His grappling's great. But when it comes down to this fight, though, man, I think this is just not a good matchup for him. I think Volkanovski would beat Charles Oliveira. I think Volkanovski would beat most lightweights, and I think it would find it quite hard to find a lightweight that I don't think Volkanovski would beat, aside from Islam Makhachev. And if this fight was on a full camp, like, you guys can call me crazy, but I genuinely might consider picking Volkanovski if it was a full camp fight and I knew Volkanovski was preparing for it. But I think that short notice is everything. And another thing as well is the hydration sort of situation in Dubai compared to the hydration sort of situation in Australia. The way that the fighters weighed in and then fought in Australia, there was a shorter period of time as it normally would be, if that makes sense, because in Australia, due to the time zone and trying to air it for USA prime time, the fighters were fighting in the morning. So they were weighing in and then fighting the next morning instead of fighting the next night. I think that they're doing the situation where they're fighting the next night in Abu Dhabi. So Islam Makhachev is going to have more time to rehydrate. So he's going to be a little bit bigger as well, a little bit more hydrated after the big weight cut, because Islam Makhachev, he cuts a lot of weight. He's a big guy for the weight class, you know what I mean? So it'll be interesting to see. But at the end of the day, I think Makhachev wins. I think it's going to be competitive, though. That's the thing about the first fight. 46% Volkanovski. I respect it. I'm going to go Makhachev by decision. There's something I will say about Volkanovski, though. I agree with these Tapology voters. I think if Volkanovski does win, it has to be by KO, to be honest with you. So, interesting. But one thing that we did get out of that first fight was I was personally surprised with how good Islam Makhachev's striking is. And I was actually quite impressed with how good Volkanovski's wrestling is. But I'm going to go Makhachev to win by decision. Would I love Volkanovski to win? Of course. I love Volkanovski. But I don't think he can do it, man. I don't know. I kind of hope he can. But, yeah, it's just a different matchup for Makhachev, though. But maybe the different matchup style could play a little bit of a factor, because for Makhachev taking this fight, you know, Volkanovski's 5'6", isn't Charles Oliveira like 5'11" or something like that? Maybe a little bit taller, kind of long-rangey guy. I mean, Volk's got long arms for his height, doesn't he? But hey, I don't know. That was a pretty bad breakdown, but my mind was kind of already made up going into the. I mean, my mind's always made up going into the breakdown, but that's how I feel about the fights. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Oh, God. Okay, if you made it this far, I actually had my boxing debut last night. So we can blame everything weird that I said based on that, because I did take a few punches to the head. And yes, I did win. I won by decision. It was a war, though, man. It was a great, great fight. I will talk about it in a different video. Maybe next week at some point, I'll just kind of make a video talking about it, just letting you guys know what went on. But yeah, it was a good fight. It was a great fight, man. Hopefully the crowd was entertained. Everyone that I talked to that was in the crowd told me it was a good fight. It was a good performance from me. So hey, that was good. And yeah, with all that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you guys so much for watching. Really appreciate all of the support.